She chose her boss over our family. Now she wants me back. My name is Grant Walker, and until one October night, I thought I had a pretty good grasp on what normal looked like. Not perfect, but solid. A mortgage that sucked the air out of our paychecks. 3 kids who seemed to sprout out of their clothes every 6 months. A job at the accounting firm that didn't inspire me, but at least kept food on the table. Life wasn't glamorous, but it was ours predictable in the way a beat-up couch is predictable. You know where every spring will stab you when you sit down. That Tuesday evening, I was sprawled on that same couch, scrolling Netflix like it was my second job. Melissa, my wife of 8 years, had just finished wrangling the kids into bed. The house was finally quiet. No arguments over homework. No tantrums about why ice cream doesn't count as dinner. Just the dishwasher humming in the kitchen and the faint barking of the neighbor's dog. For a moment, I let myself sink into the silence. Then Melissa walked in with a strange expression on her face. You get to know someone after almost a decade. You learn the little tells. I knew the smile she used when she'd bought something expensive without asking. I knew the frown she made when she was about to bring up my mother visiting. This smile was different. Too careful. Too rehearsed. She sat down right next to me. That should have been my first clue. Melissa never sat close unless she wanted to say something serious. Usually, she claimed the far corner, legs curled under her, phone in hand, liking Instagram posts from high school friends who pretended their lives were perfect. But this time, she lowered herself into the cushion right beside me, folded her hands in her lap, and looked me dead in the eyes. And then she said it. I'm going to be a surrogate for my boss. 9 words that cracked open everything I thought I knew. At first, I laughed. What else could I do? Good one, Mel, I said, hitting the mute button on some crime show where they always manage to solve a murder in exactly 42 minutes. What are we actually watching tonight? But she didn't laugh. Not even a twitch at the corner of her mouth. She just stared at me, and the seriousness in her eyes hit like a slap. You're not joking, I said. No, she replied. I'm not. The room suddenly felt too small, like the air had been sucked out. My brain scrambled for explanations. Maybe she'd misphrased it. Maybe she meant she was helping them fill out adoption paperwork or donating to some charity. Something. Anything but what she had actually said. What do you mean? My voice cracked a little. Melissa smoothed down her yoga pants, a nervous habit. Charles and Vivian asked me last week. They've been trying for years. 3 miscarriages. The doctors say it isn't safe for her anymore. They want a family. I can help. That name stuck in my ear like a thorn. Charles? Not Mr. Whitmore, the way she always called him at home. Just Charles. Intimate. Familiar. You can help? I repeated, heat rising in my chest. Help how exactly? By blowing up our marriage? Her jaw tightened. Don't be dramatic. It's not like that, not like that, I said, sitting up straighter. Melissa, you're talking about carrying another man's baby. That's exactly like that. She looked at me with the patience of someone explaining basic math to a stubborn child. It's not about us. It's about them. They're good people, Grant. They deserve this chance. I rubbed my face with both hands, trying to steady the buzzing in my skull. What about us? What about our kids? What about you? You remember how sick you were when you carried Sophie? You couldn't keep anything down for months. You swore you'd never go through pregnancy again. This is different, she said. There'll be medical support. They'll cover costs. It's not like we're on our own, I laughed bitterly. Oh, they'll cover costs. How generous. Melissa's lips thinned, but she didn't back down. This is something I want to do. I stared at her, at the woman who once cried in my arms when Jake had an ear infection, who once dreamed with me about opening a little coffee shop by the beach. Now she was telling me she wanted to hand over her body to her boss. Not for money, she claimed. Not for career. Out of some twisted sense of duty. My hands curled into fists on my knees. You've already decided, haven't you? She nodded once. No hesitation. That was the moment I realized I was no longer part of the conversation. I was just background noise to a decision she'd already made. The dishwasher clicked over to the rinse cycle, filling the silence that grew between us. Ask yourself, what would you do if the person you trusted most told you your family was negotiable? That your marriage, your children, your partnership were secondary to someone else's dream? Would you smile and call it noble? Or would you feel the ground rip out from under you? I wanted to yell. I wanted to shake her. But all I could do was sit there, the taste of bitterness rising in my mouth, as the woman I married calmly explained that our life together was now an accessory to her boss's tragedy. Her words sat between us like a live grenade, pin already pulled. I stared at her, hoping she'd laugh, say she was testing me, admit it was some sick joke. But Melissa's face didn't twitch. No hint of humor. No second thoughts. Just steady resolve. Melissa, I said, my voice scraping out of my throat. This isn't donating blood. This isn't babysitting. You're talking about carrying another man's child for 9 months in our house. In front of our kids? She leaned back, crossing her arms. You're overreacting. Overreacting. That word hit me harder than the announcement itself. Like my whole world collapsing was just me being a little dramatic. You remember Emma asking if we could get another baby sister? I asked, heat rising in my chest. What are you going to tell her when you're waddling around the house pregnant again, only to hand that baby over to your boss at the hospital? That mommy was just renting herself out for goodwill? Melissa's jaw tightened. I'll explain it. The kids will understand. They'll see I was helping people. Helping people? I snapped. Helping them? At the expense of us? Her eyes narrowed. It's my body, Grant. My choice. You don't get to decide what I do with it. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, and for the first time in our marriage, I felt like I was speaking to a stranger. And what about me? Do I get any choice in this marriage? Or am I just a bystander while you turn our home into an extension of Charles Whitmore's nursery? That name, Whitmore, hung in the air. She flinched slightly, but recovered. Don't make this about jealousy. This isn't about him. It's about doing something good. I let out a bitter laugh. Jealousy? You think this is about me being jealous? Melissa, this is about our marriage, our family, the vows we made. Silence, heavy, thick. So I said it, the words that had been coiled in my chest since she first opened her mouth. If you do this, Melissa, if you go through with being their surrogate, our marriage is over. Her eyes went wide for just a second, then narrowed again, like she'd already rehearsed for this moment. Then maybe you should rethink what being a husband means. That line landed like a bullet. Not shouted, not emotional cold, deliberate. She might as well have said, I've already chosen, and it isn't you. We sat in the dim glow of the muted TV. Two people who used to be a team, now circling each other like strangers waiting for the next strike. The dishwasher clicked to its final cycle. The neighbor's dog barked once, then went silent, as if even it knew the air inside our home was too thick with tension to interrupt. I felt the words rise in my throat, heavy as stone. So this is it, the beginning of the end. Ultimatums are supposed to end arguments. Drop the line, draw the boundary, and the other person either steps back or crosses it. But with Melissa, it was like daring her to walk into fire. She'd do it just to prove she could. 3 days after our living room detonated, the reinforcements arrived. Not mine, hers. It started with Clara, her older sister. Clara had always been the kind of person who managed to inject herself into every conflict with the moral superiority of a talk show host. She called on a Thursday evening while I was trying to help Jake with his math homework. Grant, she began, her voice dripping with honey that barely masked the steel underneath. I just wanted to say how proud I am of Melissa. What she's doing for Charles and Vivian. It's beautiful, really. Selfless, I clenched the phone tighter. Jake was chewing his pencil, waiting for me to explain fractions, and here was Clara turning my life into a public debate. Clara, I said evenly, this is between Melissa and me. No, she interrupted, too quickly. It's bigger than you. She's giving the gift of life. You should be supporting her, not trying to drag her down. The gift of life. As if she'd cured cancer instead of blowing a hole through our marriage. I bit my tongue before the words, then maybe you should volunteer, your uterus slipped out. Instead, I muttered, thanks for the call, and hung up. But Clara was only the opening act. On Sunday, after church, Melissa's mother, Joanne, cornered me in the parking lot. She hooked her arm through mine like we were old friends and said, Grant, dear, I hope you know how noble this is. Melissa is doing God's work, God's work. That's what she called ripping our family apart. Joanne, I said, trying to keep my voice low as families bustled around us. A noble act doesn't usually involve detonating your marriage and traumatizing 3 kids in the process. Her grip on my arm tightened. Marriage is about supporting each other's dreams. Melissa's dream is to help. Your role is to stand beside her, not against her. I stared at her, stunned. Did anyone stop to ask if I have a dream in this? Or am I just the collateral damage in her sainthood? Her smile never faltered. Don't be selfish, dear. This isn't about you selfish. That word echoed all the way home. That evening, I sat at our kitchen table, the same table where we'd once planned vacations we couldn't afford, and realized something chilling. Melissa had already built her army. A sister who worshipped her. A mother who cloaked every betrayal in religion. And a circle of friends ready to brand me the villain. And me? I had no one. Just the truth and the gnawing suspicion that the truth wasn't going to matter. For weeks, the house felt like a war zone where no one raised their voice. The silence was worse. Melissa moved through rooms like a woman already preparing for another life. I buried myself in work and the kids, pretending the tension wasn't dripping down the walls like condensation. Then one morning, it happened. I was making coffee in the kitchen, the sound of the old machine gurgling like a dying walrus, when Melissa patted down the stairs. She was in her ratty pink bathrobe, the one she'd had since college, and she was holding something in her hand. At first, I thought it was a receipt, maybe another bill we couldn't afford. But when she stepped into the light, I saw the small white stick, a pregnancy test. My stomach dropped straight through the floor. It worked, she said, voice trembling between triumph and fear. I'm pregnant. The room tilted. I set my mug down slowly, afraid I'd throw it against the wall if I wasn't careful. For a second, just one cruel second, my brain tricked me into old memories. Her telling me we were having Jake, tears of joy in her eyes. Then Emma, then Sophie. Those had been mornings filled with hope, love, the promise of family. But this was different. You're serious, I said flatly. She nodded. Yes, Charles and Vivian are thrilled. We're giving them the baby they always wanted. We. She actually said we. I leaned against the counter, staring at the woman who was supposed to be my partner. No, Melissa. You're giving them a baby. Without me. Against me. Don't you dare pretend this is some team effort. Her chin lifted defiantly. You knew this was happening. And I told you if it did, our marriage was over, I shot back. For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Fear, regret, but it vanished quickly, replaced by that same cold certainty I'd come to hate. She placed the test gently on the counter, like it was a trophy, and walked upstairs without another word. I stared at it until the coffee machine beeped, the smell of burnt grounds filling the room. That was the morning my marriage officially died. Not with slammed doors or a dramatic fight, but with a plastic stick left on the counter, announcing that the point of no return had arrived. By lunchtime, I had already called James Holloway, a divorce lawyer I knew from high school. Jim, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, I need to know my options. My wife is pregnant with another man's baby. The silence on the other end stretched long enough to make me wonder if the call had dropped. Then he exhaled. Grant, you better come in tomorrow. And just like that, my life split clean in two, before the test and after. If hell exists, I'm convinced it looks a lot like my house did during Melissa's pregnancy. Not fire and brimstone, no, something worse. A slow, suffocating limbo where two people pretend to share life while everything between them is already dead. Melissa refused to move out. The kids need stability, she insisted, as if her version of stability involved her waddling around carrying Charles Whitmore's child under our roof. So she claimed the guest bedroom, filled it with prenatal vitamins, and stacked baby gear in boxes labeled with Charles and Vivian's names. Every morning, I'd come downstairs to find bottles drying by the sink, or some glossy parenting book about surrogacy on the counter, and my blood would boil. She didn't even hide it anymore. And then came her requests. Grant, can you pick up pickles on your way home? Grant, can you help me assemble the crib? I'm not supposed to lift heavy things. Grant, can you drive me to the doctor's office? Charles and Vivian are out of town. Every time, my answer was the same. 6 words. Simple, cold, final. Not my baby, not my problem. The first time I said it, she looked like I'd slapped her. By the 10th, she just closed her eyes like she was absorbing a punch she couldn't block. But here's the truth. I wasn't being cruel. I was being honest. She had made her choice, and I was done cleaning up after it. Nights were the worst. Around 3 a.m., when the baby was practicing kickboxing inside her, I'd hear a faint knock on my bedroom door. Grant, please, can you just help me this once? I'd lie there, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding, and repeat the same 6 words. Not my baby, not my problem. Sometimes she'd cry softly through the door. Sometimes she'd shuffle back to the guest room without another sound. Either way, the silence that followed was deafening. Even the neighbors noticed. One Saturday, Mr. Daniels from next door saw her struggling with groceries, belly round as a basketball. He cornered me while I was taking out the trash. Grant, he said, frowning, your wife needs help. You can't just leave her like that. I shoved the garbage into the bin and snapped, she's carrying her boss's baby, not mine. Let him help her. He looked at me like I'd grown horns, but I didn't care. People could judge me all they wanted. They hadn't lived through the betrayal. They hadn't watched their wife turn into a stranger, who spoke about our family like it was optional. Life inside that house became a grotesque performance. Melissa parading around with someone else's future. Me perfecting the art of detachment. The kids sensed it too. They tiptoed more. Their questions piled up. I answered what I could, dodged what I couldn't. And every night, when I turned off the lights, I told myself one thing. This nightmare had an expiration date. 9 months. That's all I had to endure. 9 months of domestic purgatory before the truth, her truth, was finally delivered in the most literal way possible. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon in March. I was at work, buried in spreadsheets that blurred into endless gray, when my phone lit up with Melissa's name. I ignored it. It buzzed again, and again. By the 5th call, I picked up more out of morbid curiosity than concern. Grant, she gasped, her voice jagged with panic. It's time! The baby's coming. For half a heartbeat, muscle memory kicked in. The same reflex that once sent me racing to the car when she went into labor with Jake, Emma, and Sophie. My mind flashed with images of frantic hospital runs, holding her hand through contractions, whispering, you can do this. But that was then. Now, all I felt was ice. So call Charles, I said flatly. I did, she cried. He's in a meeting. His secretary said she'd tried to reach him. Then call Vivian. She's at a spa retreat. She's not answering. Her voice cracked, breaking through the thin armor she'd been wearing for months. Please, Grant, I can't do this alone. I pressed the red button and hung up. What was I supposed to do? Hold her hand while she brought another man's baby into the world? Cut the cord on the living proof of her betrayal? Number. That wasn't my role anymore. By 3 p.m., the hospital called. A nurse's voice, professional but strained. Mr. Walker, your wife has delivered a healthy baby boy. She's asking for you. I didn't hesitate. I'm not the father. Call Charles Whitmore. This has nothing to do with me. There was silence on the other end, like she wanted to argue but didn't know how. Finally, she said softly, Sir, she's very upset. She made her choice, I said. Now she can live with it. And I hung up. That evening, I picked up the kids from after-school care like it was any other Tuesday. Jake was proud of his volcano science project. Emma was pouting about a missing eraser. Sophie wanted pancakes for dinner. Normal chaos. Beautiful, blessed normal chaos. They asked where Mommy was. I told them she had to help someone at the hospital. Technically true. No need to hand them the gory details. At 8 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Melissa's voice, weak, exhausted. Grant, please come. I'm scared. The baby's perfect. He has tiny fingers and he's so beautiful. I need someone who cares. For a moment, a crack split my chest. The echo of the woman I once loved slipped through. But the truth came sharper. She hadn't cared about me when she signed away our marriage. She hadn't cared about our kids when she put another man's dream above our family. Call Charles, I whispered, gentler than I expected. He's the father, not me. And then I turned off my phone. That night, lying in the quiet of my room, I realized something terrifying. Melissa had traded everything, her marriage, her children's security, her dignity for people who hadn't even shown up when she needed them most. And me, I'd finally stopped being her safety net. 3 days after the birth, I came home from work to find Melissa's car in the driveway. For a second, I thought maybe she'd finally gone to stay with her sister, that she'd realized dragging a newborn into our crumbling house was insanity. I was wrong. The front door creaked open, and there she was, hair disheveled, eyes ringed dark with exhaustion, cradling a bundled infant in her arms. The baby's cries filled the hallway like an alarm bell. My first thought wasn't noble. It wasn't fatherly. It was raw and selfish. Not here. Not in my house. Melissa looked up at me, her face hollow but lit with a strange pride. Grant, she whispered. This is him. Isn't he beautiful? I dropped my keys into the bowl with a clatter. Why is he here? Her lips trembled. Charles and Vivian? They're taking some time. They said it's better if I keep him a few weeks, help with the transition. I barked out a laugh so bitter it startled even me. Transition. What is this? A rental service? You just bring him home like he's a foster kitten? Her eyes flashed, but she held the baby closer. Don't say that. He's real. He's perfect. Perfect, I hissed. He's proof of everything you chose over this family. The baby wailed louder, as if protesting the argument he'd been born into. Sophie peeked out from behind the stairs, wide-eyed. Mommy, whose baby is that? Melissa froze. For a second, I thought she might tell the truth. But then she crouched, forcing a tired smile. Sweetheart, sometimes babies stay with their birth mommy before they go to their forever home. Just for a little while, birth mommy. Forever home. Words twisted into child-sized lies. Emma frowned. Like when we fostered Aunt Joanne's cat? Yes, Melissa said quickly. Something like that. The irony nearly knocked me over. She was comparing carrying another man's baby to babysitting a cat. Within days, the house no longer smelled like us. It smelled like formula and diapers, the sour tang of sleepless nights. The guest room turned into a makeshift nursery, filled with bassinets and boxes of baby clothes Charles and Vivian had dropped off before disappearing again. And Melissa, she kept looking at me like I was failing some test. Like if I'd just pick up the baby once, hold him, help her for a minute, she could pretend everything was normal. But every time she asked, my answer was the same. Flat, final. Not my baby, not my problem. 2 weeks. That's how long the baby lasted in our house before the dam finally burst. Every night, the crying echoed through the walls. Every morning, the bottles piled up in the sink. The kids tiptoed around like prisoners of war, afraid that the smallest noise would set off another argument. I tried to hold it together, for them. But the pressure kept building, and Melissa kept pushing. It was a Thursday evening. Jake was at the table, struggling through his math homework. Emma and Sophie were bickering over who got the last juice box. Upstairs, the baby screamed like a fire alarm. Melissa staggered down the stairs, her face pale, her eyes glassy with exhaustion. She held the baby out in front of her, arms trembling. Grant, she said, voice breaking. Please, just hold him for 10 minutes so I can shower. I didn't even look up from Jake's notebook. Not my baby. Not my problem. Something in her snapped. Her footsteps pounded down the stairs. She stood in the middle of the living room, baby wailing in her arms, and screamed, You owe me! You're my husband! You can't just sit there like a stone while I fall apart! Jake froze, pencil in midair. Emma's eyes went wide. Sophie clutched her stuffed bunny so tight its ear bent sideways. Slowly, I stood. My voice was low, steady, the kind of steady that only comes when rage turns to ice. Owe you? I repeated. Let me explain something, Melissa. I don't owe you a damn thing. Her lips parted, shock breaking through her anger. You chose this, I continued, stepping closer. You chose Charles and Vivian's needs over our marriage. You chose to get pregnant with another man's child under our roof, in front of our kids. And now you want me to step in and clean up the mess? It's not, she tried, but I cut her off. It's exactly that. You turned me into a bystander in my own marriage. You burned this family to the ground, and now you want me to carry water for the fire you started? Number, not anymore. The baby shrieked louder, as if amplifying the chaos. Melissa's face crumpled. You're abandoning me, she whispered. I grabbed my keys from the counter. No, I'm refusing to let you drag me down with you. Where are you going? Anywhere but here. I walked out, the slam of the door shaking the frame. For 2 hours, I drove aimlessly, radio blaring nonsense, my mind replaying every choice that had brought us to this breaking point. When I returned, the house was silent. Melissa's car was gone. So was the baby. For the first time in months, I could breathe. For 2 glorious days after Melissa left, the house felt normal. The kids and I ate cereal for dinner without anyone sighing about nutrition. We watched cartoons past bedtime. We laughed. It was like breathing after months of suffocating in smoke. But peace doesn't last. Not when Melissa had an army. The voicemail started first. Clara, of course, always Clara. Her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. Grant, how dare you abandon my sister when she needed you the most? She's sitting in my living room sobbing with a newborn in her arms because her husband decided to play cold-hearted. You should be ashamed I deleted it. Then came Jennifer, her college roommate, a woman I'd met twice in my life. Grant, I just can't believe you. Melissa is doing something selfless and beautiful. And you're punishing her. She gave the gift of life, and you're acting like a monster. Delete. But Joanne's message, the mother-in-law, who never missed an opportunity to gut me with a smile, was the pièce de résistance. Nearly 5 minutes long, dripping with passive-aggressive venom. Grant, dear, I raised 3 children. I know what sacrifice looks like. And what Melissa has done is the purest act of sacrifice. She's brought life into the world for people who couldn't have it themselves. That is God's work, and instead of standing beside her, you turned your back. I am deeply disappointed in you. Deeply. You have failed as a husband and as a Christian man. I listened to that one twice, half because I couldn't believe her audacity, half because I wanted to burn the words into memory. By the end of the week, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Texts from friends, from church members, even from Charles himself, all trying to convince me that I was the villain in Melissa's sainthood play. Charles's message was the boldest. Smooth, polished, fake. Grant, I understand emotions are high right now, but Melissa has given Vivian and me the greatest gift imaginable. We are all connected now, through this child. Let's work together. As a family, I laughed so hard, I nearly dropped the phone. Family? He thought he could buy my wife's womb and then adopt me into his little fairy tale? Not a chance. I didn't reply to any of them. I didn't owe them words. But the truth lodged in my chest was heavier. Melissa wasn't going to stop. She had turned her choices into a crusade, and I was the designated devil. And now, the world, or at least her world, was rallying behind her. 6 months after I filed, we finally stood across from each other in a wood-paneled courtroom that smelled like disinfectant and broken promises. By then, Melissa had settled into her role as the tragic heroine. Black dress, hair pulled back in a neat bun, eyes glistening like she'd been practicing in the mirror. Behind her sat Clara, Joanne, and because irony has no shame, Charles and Vivian Whitmore, like they were attending opening night of a play called Poor Melissa and the Evil Husband. Her lawyer Steinberg was a caricature straight out of bad television, perfect tan, perfect hair, voice oozing with manufactured indignation. He gestured toward Melissa like she was a saint painted on stained glass. Your Honor, he began. My client made the ultimate sacrifice. She gave life to a couple who had no hope. And how was she repaid? By being abandoned, by being humiliated, by a husband who refused to support her in her time of greatest need. Melissa dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, right on cue. Clara sniffled audibly in the gallery. Even Charles leaned forward like he was about to give a TED talk on gratitude. I felt the anger rise in my throat, but my lawyer, Jim Holloway, the guy who still wore off-the-rack suits but actually knew the law, put a steadying hand on my arm. Wait, he whispered. Let him finish hanging himself. And then Jim stood. No theatrics, no crocodile tears, just a stack of evidence thick enough to choke an elephant. Your Honor, he said calmly, the plaintiff's story is moving. Unfortunately, it has very little to do with the truth. He pulled out a folder. Exhibit A, text messages between the plaintiff and her sister, in which she admits her husband opposed the surrogacy from the beginning. Her words, not mine. Grant is being such a baby about this. It's my body, my choice. He doesn't get a vote. Melissa's face drained of color. Jim didn't stop. Exhibit B, emails between the plaintiff and her employer, Mr. Whitmore, discussing compensation, logistics, and secrecy, without ever mentioning her husband's objections. Steinberg jumped up. Objection? Overruled, the judge said, already looking annoyed. And finally, Jim said, pulling out his ace, a recorded conversation in which Mr. Walker explicitly tells his wife that proceeding with the surrogacy will end their marriage. Her response? Then maybe you should rethink what being a husband means. The courtroom went dead silent. Even the judge leaned back in his chair, eyebrows raised. Melissa shifted in her seat, tissue frozen halfway to her cheek. Charles and Vivian looked like someone had slapped them with a ledger of unpaid debts. Jim adjusted his glasses. Your Honor, this marriage did not dissolve because my client abandoned his wife. It dissolved because the plaintiff made a unilateral decision to prioritize her boss's desires over her husband's clearly stated objections. This is not abandonment. This is consequence. The judge scribbled something in his notes. I caught his expression, tired, skeptical, but seeing the picture clearly now. And in that moment, for the first time in nearly a year, I felt the scales finally tip toward the truth. 2 weeks later, we were back in the same courtroom. This time, there were no theatrics left, no tissues dabbed for effect, just the hard, sterile weight of judgment about to be handed down. Judge Morrison, an older man with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses, scanned the stack of evidence like he'd seen every ugly story marriage could produce, and ours was just another file in the pile. After reviewing the documentation and testimony, he began, voice even. This court finds the dissolution of the Walker marriage was the direct result of unilateral decisions made by the plaintiff without regard to her spouse's clearly stated objections. Melissa flinched, as if the words themselves were bullets. Furthermore, the judge continued, the plaintiff's actions demonstrate a disregard for the stability required to maintain a healthy family environment. Therefore, primary physical custody of the minor children, Jacob Walker, Emma Walker, and Sophie Walker, is awarded to the defendant, Grant Walker. The plaintiff will be granted supervised visitation at times and locations determined by a court-appointed mediator. Supervised visitation. The legal system's way of saying, we don't trust you alone with your own kids. The gavel hit the block with a crack like a gunshot. Just like that, 9 months of purgatory and 6 months of legal warfare ended in less than 10 minutes. Melissa broke. Not the delicate crying she'd practiced in front of her lawyer, but raw heaving sobs that made her shoulders shake. Claire wrapped an arm around her, glaring daggers at me like I'd just committed some unforgivable crime. Joanne dabbed her eyes, whispering prayers under her breath. And in the back row, Charles and Vivian shifted uncomfortably, like spectators suddenly realizing they'd helped write a tragedy they couldn't fix. I stood, adjusted my tie, and picked up my briefcase. For a moment, I looked at the woman who'd once been my partner in everything. You should have thought about them, I said quietly, before you decided to carry another man's baby. Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't stay to hear them. I walked out into the September air, crisp and clean, like the world had been scrubbed of the stench of lies. For the first time in nearly a year, I felt like I could breathe again. 6 months later, my kitchen on a Saturday morning looked nothing like a battleground. No baby bottles cluttering the sink, no tension hanging in the air thick enough to choke on. Just sunlight streaming through the blinds, the smell of coffee, and my 3 kids turning pancake making into a contact sport. Jake was arguing with Emma about the correct amount of vanilla extract. Sophie was dipping a spoon into the batter like it was soup. The dog we didn't own barked in her imagination because Sophie insisted we should get one just for pancake days. This was life. Chaotic, imperfect, messy, but it was ours. Sometimes people expect divorce to hollow you out. They expect bitterness, loneliness, despair. And yes, there were nights when Emma cried, asking if mommy stopped loving us. Days when Jake acted out in class. Mornings when Sophie asked why mommy didn't live here anymore. Those moments hurt like hell. But mostly it's been peaceful. Like turning off a TV that's been blasting static for so long, you forgot what silence felt like. Melissa still calls sometimes. The pattern never changes. Grant, can you help with the electric bill? Just this once? Grant, the baby's been crying all night. I don't know what to do. Grant, I made a mistake. Can we try again? My answer is always the same. No. Not with cruelty, but with finality. Because I've learned something. You can't save someone from the consequences of their own choices. She shows up for her supervised visits when the court orders it. Sometimes late, sometimes not at all. The kids have learned not to pin their hopes too high. They're resilient, but they're not blind. And me, I've learned contentment. Not the flashy happiness you post on Instagram, but the quiet kind. The kind where you can sit with a cup of coffee, listen to your kids squabble about chocolate chips versus blueberries, and realize, despite everything you did the right thing. Melissa's baby will never be mine. But these 3 kids, the ones giggling in my kitchen, spilling batter everywhere, asking if syrup belongs on scrambled eggs, they are mine. My responsibility, my joy, my proof that sometimes walking away isn't weakness. It's survival. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe one day I'll trust again. Maybe I won't. But for now, this is enough. More than enough. Because the house is quiet when it should be quiet. Loud when it should be loud. And finally, it feels like home again. Thanks for watching until the end. If this story hit home, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next full story. Drop a comment. Would you stay or walk away like Grant?